lands of Nova Scotia are part of Mi'kma'ki, which we have called home since time immemorial. For thousands of years, the Mi'kmaq had ways of using and caring for these lands. While the Mi'kmaq still have connections to many of the places in Mi'kma'ki, much of the land within the national parks remains untouched, pristine, and with resources our ancestors knew well. We have heard that Mi'kmaq want to regain access to these lands and to have a meaningful role in the stewardship, protection, and management of these lands, waters, and resources.
These areas are meaningful to our people, and many have said for too long. They feel isolated from these lands that are so intrinsically connected to their culture. Because of this, for some time, KMK in partnership with CMM and UINR have been working to strengthen the relationship between Parks Canada and the Mi'kmaq of Nova Scotia. Our discussions with Parks Canada have focused on how we can restore the Mi'kmaq connection and governance of these important places.
In 2012, this originally meant working on an interim agreement to see the Mi'kmaq get free entry to Toqi'maliaptmu'k National Park and National Historic Site, the Cape Highlands National Park, and the Fortress of Louisbourg National Historic Site. During the same year, and through the interim agreement, 2 advisory committees were also established, one on the mainland and one in Unama'ki, that saw Mi'kmaq representatives working with Parks Canada to discuss issues that affect the Mi'kmaq. Over the years, KMK and Parks Canada have also developed joint archaeological projects in Toqi'maliaptmu'k National Park and National Historic Site, as well as at the Cape Highlands National Park.
KMK also began working in partnership with CMM and Parks Canada to develop stewardship and use guidelines for white birch in Toqi'maliaptmu'k National Park. CMM and UINR, with support from KMK, developed the Earth Keepers program to collaborate with Parks Canada on integrating the Mi'kmaq knowledge into stewardship and cultural interpretation of the parks, supporting joint governance and management. All these projects helped us develop a relationship of cooperation and understanding between Parks Canada and the Mi'kmaq. They have opened the door to dialogue on how important these lands and resources are to all of us.
They have also provided us an opportunity over the last 5 years to talk to knowledge holders, elders, youth, communities, and organizations about how we can work alongside Parks Canada.
Most recently, these discussions have led us drafting an arrangement with Parks Canada as a commitment to work together. Our former Mi'kmaq senior advisor and trusted elder, the late Joe B. Marshall, told us that in Mi'kmaq, this is called Toqi'maliaptmu'k, meaning we will look after together.
About the Toqi'maliaptmu'k Arrangement. This arrangement talks about recognizing and affirming Mi'kmaq treaty and Aboriginal rights, and discusses how these rights can be exercised in national parks and national historic sites. Rights respecting access to and management of natural resources, and the right to care for and interpret our culture, archaeology, language, and history in the national parks and national historic sites are 2 major examples of what this arrangement is about. It talks about the projects that we've already developed, like the free entry and joint archaeology as already mentioned, but it also commits both parties to build on these successes. As part of this work, Parks Canada and the Mi'kmaq want to establish a joint stewardship board made up of community members who are knowledgeable about the connections we have with the lands and resources and our culture and language. Together, this board will advise the Assembly of Nova Scotia Mi'kmaq Chiefs and the federal minister responsible for Parks Canada on the governance and management of park lands. Our goal is to see the chiefs and the minister share equal decision-making powers about these park lands going forward. It is not a new treaty. It does not impact, define, or alter our treaty and Aboriginal rights. It sets out the way our existing rights are implemented. In fact, this arrangement is developed to only be in place for a 10-year period, and at any time during those 10 years, if the Mi'kmaq no longer want to do things this way, they can choose to end the arrangement.
Activities such as hunting, fishing, and gathering in National Park can have safety and conservation concerns. We all recognize that.
So this arrangement includes stewardship plans that talk about how the Mi'kmaq and parks will work together to ensure that rights implementation is done respectfully, safely, and according to important Mi'kmaq concepts like Netegalim and Msitnogama.
This is the first of its kind for the Mi'kmaq of Nova Scotia. We believe it is a good example of how we, as a nation, can develop arrangements to ensure rights of the Mi'kmaq are upheld, respected, and implemented. It creates ways for the Mi'kmaq to return to the places they have felt removed from for far too long.
What is in the draft document? The draft arrangement has several elements that outline how it will function. This includes shared principles that illustrate our mutual understanding of how national parks and national historic sites should be managed. These shared principles include items like
Shared Principle Number 1, Mi'kmaq and Parks Canada Co-Management, or how we will work together to forge a relationship, one rooted in our shared values on the stewardship of natural and cultural resources of these lands.
Shared Principle Number 2, Important Mi'kmaq Landscapes. The cultural landscape in our national parks and national historic sites is a testament of the long history that the Mi'kmaq have had on these lands. Yet the Mi'kmaq have been omitted from the interpretation of these park spaces, landscapes, and stories. We want to see more Mi'kmaq involvement and input into not only how these areas are managed, but also to work collaboratively with Parks Canada so that these current and historic Mi'kmaq cultural landscapes are respected and understood. It is important that the decision-making and governance of these landscapes reflect Mi'kmaq stories, culture, and history. We have the right to tell our own story.
Shared Principle Number 3, Netegalim, Msitnogama, and Eduaptumumk are important and equal management concepts for national parks and national historic sites. We all recognize the importance of Netegalim and ecological integrity in Eduaptumumk, or Tuwait. These concepts explain how we live in harmony with the natural world around us and how we think about stewardship and conservation. There is an exchange between individuals, human and non-human, and we must respect the land for the gifts it provides. In the spirit of Eduaptumumk, the Mi'kmaq and Parks Canada have agreed to acknowledge and respect each other's understanding of these lands. Through Mi'kmaq principles, we will use our collective scientific, cultural, and ecological integrity to ensure that we are both working toward what is right for the environment. Shared Principle Number 4, Co-Management and Toqi'maliaptmu'k. We have to respect that each other has a role in managing these lands. We also know that the Mi'kmaq and Parks Canada may want to make decisions based on our own processes and understandings. We have agreed to work together on issues and share responsibilities for managing these lands. We both have a view on how these lands can be co-managed based upon shared concerns and mutual interests. And thus, we have agreed to work together and talk things through. Shared Principle Number 5, Renewable Resource Management. The exercise of renewable resource stewardship on and within the lands must embody Netegalim, Msitnogama, and Eduaptumumk, ensuring that the decisions are grounded in conservation and Toqi'maliaptmu'k. For Mi'kmaq, stewardship is a balance between livelihood and ensuring the protection and careful use of resources, not only today, but for the next 7 generations. This includes Mi'kmaq teachings, lessons, and involvement of youth and elders in these critical conversations. This will help to ensure these parks not only survive, but thrive moving forward.
Shared Principle Number 6, Mi'kmaq and Parks Canada Reconciliation. Reconciliation must happen in Canada. This arrangement has been drafted in the spirit of our treaty relationship, expressing a way for Parks Canada and the Mi'kmaq to build a path forward as partners in a way that honors our ancestors and recognizes our responsibilities to each other and to the lands. These shared principles are a significant component of the arrangement. They outline why we are doing this, and most importantly, why it is vital to who we are as people. It has been drafted to focus on rights implementation issues. We have the right to demonstrate our culture within the lands of Mi'kma'ki, including within national parks. We have the right to access and harvest resources from our lands according to Mi'kmaq management principles. We want to see Mi'kmaq language and history in these parks, in interpretation, presentation, and how the stories of the land are told. We have a role to ensure that sacred sites and burial sites are protected and respected. We want to see the parks being used for community events, Mi'kmaq ceremonies, and elder and youth camps. We want to establish archaeological research and fieldwork protocols and discuss the repatriation, custody, and decision-making of our Mi'kmaq artifacts and heritage resources.
We want the Mi'kmaq Earthkeepers to have a role in the parks, working alongside those from Parks Canada to better understand the environment. We want to see the recognition of Mi'kmaq harvesting rights in national parks. We know how to harvest safely, with conservation in mind. We want to improve access for the Mi'kmaq to economic opportunities. We have committed to developing a process for Mi'kmaq contracting and employment.
We know that's a lot to cover in one document, but we also feel that none of it is out of reach. Parks Canada has a mandate to care for these lands. As Mi'kmaq, we have an inherent right and responsibility. We hope that this document will be an important step towards ensuring that our rights are respected and that we have an equal voice in the shared governance of these lands. Together, we can have a role in helping visitors to every national park and national historic site in Nova Scotia understand that the Mi'kmaq not only have a story about these lands based upon our history, but that we continue to have a presence on them today, and that they have always been and will always be Mi'kmaqi.
For more information, contact Gulamug Mauguswan at mi'kmaqrights.com.